Hello, so today I am going to talk to you about revision and why it is so important if you would really like to be a writer. I'd like to start you off with a few quotes that I found in particular. It's very interesting. The first one is by Henry Green. It says, "The more you leave out, the more you highlight what you leave in," meaning that a good writer is going to cut what is unnecessary and only leave the bare bones. The second quote is by William Faulkner. "In writing, you must kill all your darlings." And what Faulkner means there is that sometimes when we write things, we think that we are creating these really pretty words and putting them together in a beautiful way. But if the beauty of the words interrupts the actual meaning and reading of your piece, sometimes even if what you write is very pretty, you're going to have to cut some sections. You're going to have to cut those darlings. The next one is from Raymond Chandler. He says, "Throw up into your typewriter every morning." So that's his version of free writing. "And then clean up every noon." So it's a great way to produce writing is to just write and write and write pages upon pages every day. But what you really need to remember as a writer is that it's important that you clean up that work after the fact. And finally, Don Roth says, "I found the best way to revise your own work is to pretend that somebody else wrote it and then to rip the living crap out of it." Now, this one is really difficult. And so often what I suggest to my new writers would be that you would take a couple days away from a piece before you try to revise it, because often when we first write something, we are immune to the problems within it. But if you get some distance, you will probably be able to look at your work more objectively. So before we do anything else, I really want to point out that there are major differences between editing and revision. So maybe what you're used to in other classes would be that you would edit a piece of writing. And primarily what editing means is that you just look for tiny, small changes that could be made. A lot of times more grammar and punctuation. But although I am looking for editing in a final draft, what I'm looking for more from you for this assignment is your ability to revise and almost completely reconstruct. So revision is actually making big changes to an overall structure, intent, or design of the piece. So I'd like to talk to you about a process called STAR revision. This is developed by Kelly Gallagher, one of the gurus in teaching English. And the acronym STAR is supposed to help you remember the words substitute, take out, add in, add in, and rearrange. So substitute, take out, add in, and rearrange. So substitute would be substituting words for additional words, content for other content. You're going to make some big changes. To take out would mean to cross out problematic chunks that are off topic, don't make sense, or detract from the piece. Add in, what could the author add in to aid understanding of the piece or help improve it? And rearrange, how could the author arrange the essay or piece differently? Is there a better place to start? Then could flashbacks be used to include background information later? So Kelly Gallagher talks about how good writing is kind of like pimping your ride, MTV style. So if you could just take a moment to think about a vehicle that you would want to drive. And if you were editing that vehicle, right, you might make some small changes, maybe get an oil change, maybe buff out a scratch on the exterior. Whereas if you're really going to pimp out that ride, right, you're going to make some major changes to that vehicle. So maybe you're going to take out the back seat and turn that into a lounge area. Maybe you're going to put some giant wheels on the car that are almost like twice the size of the actual vehicle, kind of turn it into a monster truck. Maybe you redo the whole paint, you take out the engine. So we're talking about major changes when you're actually talking about revising. So what I'd like to show you is one of the columns that I wrote for a USA Today. And I want to show you that by the time I was finished, I had 182 edits or revisions to that column. If you plan on doing any writing for newspapers, magazines, even blogs, you really have to watch your word count because space is what costs money, whether it's an advertisement that you're creating, a blog post, a newspaper article, a magazine article. Space costs those companies money, and so you need to take up the least amount of space possible to have the maximum amount of effect. And so if I click on or I click through this column, I just want to show you some of my editing pages. So if you look here, so we have my original version, and then you see some of the revision changes that I made, and these are actual revisions. So for example, originally it said, "Till death do us part." That's what they said, and it seems, and then I said, "Unlike the rest of the world," they actually mean it because my parents have been through 59 years of marriage and 9 children, snotty noses and police citations, Band-Aids and bloody noses, toddlers and teenagers. They've made it. So you'll see I crossed out "and boyfriends." I changed "you" to "they." Sometimes changing the point of view can make a huge effect on a piece. I added in this short sentence at the end to really help nail down my varied sentence structure. And then "till death do us part," that's what they said. Still married, still breaking bread, still tending the garden, still holding apple blossom festivals. But then that sounded clunky to me, right? So I added some in. "Till death do us part," that's what they said. Extending to each other the smooth and somewhat foolish hands of youth. Now with crinkled smiles and wrinkled brows, 59 years later, they are still married, still breaking bread, still tending the garden, still holding apple blossom festivals and turkey dinners, still watching sunsets and laughing over a deck of cards, a living testament to the fact that marriages can work. So again, you're seeing some major changes. Some things crossed out, some things are added in. If we click to the next screen, you'll see some more major changes. So originally in the column I wrote, "Love is about the little things, but not in the hokey gestures suggested in cosmopolitan magazines or in a quick search on Google for how to make your relationship last." I didn't like the way that sounded in my piece, so I changed it to say, "When I think about their story, this is what I realize. The self-help books are right. Love is about the little things, but not in the bouquets of roses and candlelit dinners illustrated in sappy romance movies." So I decided instead of using Cosmo to talk about romance movies. What I really want you to notice is even though I was very attached to these lines, like "Love is, I'll start to do the caramel apples, you have enough to do in the store," I didn't have enough room for it, so I cut it and I added something else. I didn't have enough room for this next line, so I had to cut it. Lots of cuts, lots of additions. So my additions are in the highlighted section and my cuts are crossed out. And in each of those choices, right, I had to think about what did I really want this piece to say and how could I say it in the best possible way. So when I look at your final pieces, I want to see the same attention to detail. You'll look at, I had supersized candy bars. So right here, supersized candy bars from Aldi's. I wanted to add something a little bit more specific, so I said supersized candy bars with almonds from Aldi's, trying to add to that sensory detail. I added in pajama clad to add sensory detail to this scene. Just lots of changes, and I just want you to really notice how important it is to make those changes. My original ending said, "Love is looking down when everyone else has crashed to see someone is still holding your hand." And then I added some stuff about Wisconsin weather that I didn't have before. All of these changes really ended up making the final piece what it was, and it focused it how I wanted it to be focused. So if you're interested in looking at that final draft and what came out of it, you'll see here's my post-crescent version, and then here's my Google Doc. But what I really want you to take away from today is that you cannot grow too attached to your writing. You have to step back, reevaluate what you want the piece to do, who your audience is, and how can you say what you want to say in the most meaningful way without taking up more space than is necessary. If you think about it, our lives are so full and busy that we don't need added clutter. And that's the way you need to think about your writing. You want every word to be carefully chosen, every verb, and that way you can let your writing speak for itself. I look forward to seeing your revisions.